Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to Conversations Off the Couch. I'm Ruth Reinhard, and I chat with people who are making a difference in the world or just doing things differently. This month, it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I'm taking the opportunity to speak with a very special lady called Donna Thistlethwaite. And before I sign over to Donna, I just want to read a little bit about her to you. So, she's a mental wellness advocate, keynote speaker, and trainer. She experienced a mental health crisis in 2012 that culminated in jumping from the Brisbane Story Bridge in an attempt to end her life. Today, she's an award-winning entrepreneur and an accomplished speaker, sharing her journey and insights to empower and equip individuals and leaders with awareness and strategies to create emotionally resilient individuals and teams. I just at this point want to point out before I introduce Donna that if we will be talking about suicide, mental health issues, if any of this discussion raises concerns for you, please reach out. Lifeline or a 24/7, or reach out to family or friends. Or if it's just not a good day for you to be watching it, you can come back to this video at any time. Good morning, Donna, and welcome to Conversations Off the Couch.
Hi, Ruth. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Donna, I get the spine tingles whenever things about suicide and mental health and all that type of thing comes up. And I'm really glad that we shine the spotlight on it because
Mm.
we all know we look after our physical health, we know to have water, we know to exercise and all that. But often the mental health is something that's neglected, I think, to a large degree. Is that something you would agree with?
Absolutely, Ruth. I think yeah, there's been that stigma around for a very long time, and it's really challenging for people to talk about mental health. We often don't have a vocab to do it. Uh, we tend to think we have to deal with our issues ourselves, and need to toughen up and appear fine to the rest of the world. And the problem with that is it can cause us some real difficulties in our life. So yeah, look, I look forward to the day when there is no distinction between mental health and physical health, that they're one and the same, but we have quite some way to go before we get there.
Absolutely. And I can remember growing up in a small country town, and I don't think mental health was even mentioned. And it was kind of like, oh, they're not well and they just disappeared. Like, you never heard anything like postnatal depression, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
As a child, I didn't hear about it. And of course, now it just doesn't discriminate. We can have people on the land that are under enormous pressure because of the drought. The suicide rate is climbing. In our young people, the suicide rate is climbing. Like, and it can form in lots of things. It can come up as anxiety, panic attacks, poor sleeping, poor eating. It can come up in lots of
Yeah.
different forms, can't it, in terms of mental health issues?
Absolutely. There can be lots of different signs to monitor in ourselves, but also in the people around us, the people that we care for and care about. So, some of those things that you just mentioned, absolutely are signs that somebody might be struggling, things like them withdrawing, sudden changes in their behavior. So, normally they're quite a chatty and, vivacious person, but all of a sudden they've gone quiet and they're out of character. Maybe they're somebody that's always been at work on time and they're really diligent, but all of a sudden they're coming in late and then they're not applying themselves to work, or so it seems, as they used to. Maybe they're not getting the same results. And these can all be little clues that something's going on for somebody. And you're right, it could be anxiety, it could be, depression, it could be They might be having substance use issues at the moment. And we don't need to know exactly what's going on in order to be able to just have a conversation with someone and say, hey, how are you? I've noticed these changes. I just want you to know I care. And I'd really love to, chat about what's going on for you right now.
And I think you alluded to something just earlier about, people, that shame, the perceived shame around it. And I think for
Yeah.
for men in particular, like, they're being kind of told to man up, and depression and things like this, just they fight it until often it's too late. And
Yeah.
I think COVID, I've been watching the COVID stats, and everybody has, because
Yeah.
they're out every day. And here in Queensland, we've been most fortunate because of the way it's been managed.
Yes.
By a premier, whether that was right or wrong, we won't get into it. But the thing
Mm.
is that the collateral damage of something like COVID-19 isn't even being counted as yet, because people, I often hear the stories. Everybody
Mm.
says, "Oh my God, I'm home. My husband's home with me 24/7, or my children are home. I've been homeschooling,
Yeah.
or I can't get out. I'm with these people
Yeah.
24/7." So I think we're going to see some fairly significant mental health issues going forward, and in particular, I guess,
Yeah.
in places like Victoria, where they were really hard hit, and we're just talking about Australia now, of
Yeah.
course. But in
Yes.
Queensland here, we were lucky. I was able to cruise along and still get out and walk and things like that. So I guess that's something
Yeah.
that we will keep an eye on. And in terms of the workplace, getting people back into the workplace, somebody said to me the other day, when you when you had to work outside of the outside of your home, you always kind of dreamed of working from home. And she said, when you get in it, you don't want to do it. You just want to kind of get back to work. So because
Yeah.
the whole social interaction around that as well, isn't it? And you do a lot
Absolutely.
of corporate work as well, Donna. So I
Yeah.
guess, will see that going forward a lot.
Yeah, so there has definitely, in my experience, been an increase in interest and demand for things like mental health first aid and mental health awareness to support our workforces, because people recognize, organizations recognize that this can be a very stressful time for people. I think life generally could be stressful, challenging for us. We know that 20% of Australians experience a mental illness in any given year, and 45% of us over our lifetime. And they were pre-COVID stats. And what we've seen are services like Beyond Blue and Lifeline experiencing increases in their services of anywhere between 30 and 60%, on a month by month basis. And so, from that, I think we could extrapolate that, it's having COVID is having a significant impact on mental health, and that there may be some ongoing implications of that over time. And I know there's been some modelling done around the impact on suicide statistics. That is quite alarming if it indeed goes in that way. But the part of the challenge we have is that there's a significant lag between when somebody dies by suicide and when the statistics are released. Like it's a year or more later, because there's a process that needs to occur. So I think the government's actually working on changing that, but you can't tell in real time what the true impact is.
Yeah, and I guess that brings me to your story, Donna.
Mm.
Your story was featured on the ABC Australian Story.
Yeah,
So your journey with mental health has been a very public one.
yeah,
And I would imagine at the time that would have been fairly horrendous for you when it was all happening. Would you like to take us through your journey, if that's not too uncomfortable for you, about
sure.
what happened, if to get you to the point where you didn't think your life was worth living, and that
Yeah,
you then went off the Story Bridge? And for those viewers that aren't based in Brisbane, the Story Bridge is our I guess it's our harbour bridge that Sydney has. The Story Bridge is our main bridge here. It's quite high. So
Yeah.
please share with us, Donna.
Yeah, so it was back in 2012, and I was a corporate HR professional. I'd been in that role around 15 years, or in that type of role, and I had lots of friends in my life. I was considered enthusiastic and good at my job. I'd always had these little cracks, I guess, in my psyche that people weren't necessarily aware of. Sort of feeling over many years of not being good enough and really doubting myself. And it had improved over time. I had some childhood trauma that no doubt contributed to these feelings, but most people weren't really aware of that because I wasn't pretending. I was generally a happy, sort of joyful person, but definitely there was some cracks there. And so in 2012, I was put into a new leadership role at work, and I was working part-time. I had a baby, child. He was 2, and I had an argument with somebody at work, and it effectively triggered all of my old stories and beliefs, my patterns of thinking, that then sort of just created this. It was almost like this whirlpool of being sort of sucked into these negative thoughts. So at the time, I was I'd spent a lot of my career advising managers on how to lead better. And here I was with a staff member who I had a stand-up argument with at work in one of those open plan offices where everyone can hear everything. And I felt like I obviously had no idea what I was doing. Like I felt like an imposter. Who was I to guide these managers? Clearly, I was a terrible leader. And so I took it all very, very personally. And instead of reaching out to somebody to say, hey, I'm really struggling, I kept it to myself because I thought reaching out would be admitting to the people who didn't yet know that I was failing. And so I just tried to deal with it myself. But I just got sucked further and further into it. And, I would walk away from discussions with people with this voice in my head saying, oh, they think you've got no idea what you're doing, or they're wondering why the hell you don't know this. And so what our brains will often do is make up stories that reflect what it is that's going on inside of us. So I was in fear and panic, and then everything was interpreted through those lens and these old thoughts and feelings I had about never being good enough. And now it's like everyone's found out that it's true. I'm hopeless. And it was only really 10 days that this really blew up. And my boss at the time was away out of the country. My partner was away on a holiday, and he'd never gone off on a holiday on his own or with one of his mates before. And so I didn't want to bother him. And so, just dealt with it myself, stopped sleeping, stopped exercising, couldn't focus at all, and really withdrew from people, and got to the point where I just thought I was going to get sacked from work. And I had been there 16 and a half years, and I had a great track record. And, as a rational person, I can appreciate that. It was a very unlikely scenario. But at the time, it became really real for me. And then I just thought, oh my gosh, like this is just a disaster. I don't know how to fix it. And I just thought, I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of this situation. I was worried that I'd be a terrible role model to my son, and we would lose a property that my partner had owned. And I just got caught up in all of these thoughts. And that's basically how I ended up standing on the bridge and unfortunately deciding to jump.
I can't get my head around that, Donna. I thought anybody that jumps, as I said, that bridge is very high.
Mm.
How did you survive that? Like, Did you hit
Yeah.
water or did you hit ground? Because not
Yeah.
all the Story Bridge is over water. Some of it's over ground.
Yeah, absolutely. So I landed in the water. I actually, as I climbed over, I had this moment of panic. I just, when your breath's taken away, it was like, and
Mm.
then I just said to myself, it's okay. You're going to the other side. And then I still remember the feeling of just a calm coming over my body, like just feeling completely relaxed and I don't know, yeah, at ease. And then I sometimes wonder, how I have wondered, if that was why I actually survived, because my body was so relaxed. And I woke up in the Royal Brisbane Hospital, not ever expecting that as an outcome. I was in shock. I was just like, oh my gosh, where am I? And then it just came flooding back to me. And I seriously had not anticipated that as an outcome, which is, again, completely irrational because, obviously some people do survive, but I hadn't entertained that thought.
Hitting water, some people may not know, but hitting water from a high, um, high
Like,
altitude, whatever,
mm,
high rate, is actually like hitting cement.
yeah, that's what
Um,
they say.
and they
Mm,
say that I've often heard people say, "Oh, if you jump off a building and you're drunk, you're probably likely to survive because you're really relaxed." And
there
so
you
you know,
go.
yeah, and that's why children often survive things because they don't have that
Mm,
trauma happening in the head. They don't, have that anxiety.
mm.
Um, so somebody was obviously down in the river that picked you up, yeah?
Yeah, so I resurfaced like to the top of the water, and then I don't remember anything after that. But a passerby had called the emergency services, and they had notified. It's like a river control where they have a radio that speaks to people on the river, and they put out an alert that somebody had jumped, and a river cat crew, a city cat crew, were then on the lookout, and they found me, and they actually thought what they'd seen was a log. I was floating face down, and they went to investigate, thankfully, and they saved my life.
Yeah, the bridge, the river does have a lot of debris in it, so you could quite
Mm.
realise that, yeah, they'd think it was a log, and thank God somebody was
Yeah,
there. And I guess
yeah.
I've often wondered, you know, when people take their life, they suicide, does a different mind take over? Like I don't like heights, so I probably, if I was going to do this, I probably would have jumped off the bridge because I hate heights. But
Mm.
I often I've often told the story to myself. They can't possibly be in a sane mind. They to be able to kind of inflict pain, because as humans
Yes.
we don't willingly inflict pain. Well, I don't
No.
even like needles, but I'm a bit sooky.
Yes.
So listening to your story
Mm.
tells me, like, you had that last minute rush, I guess,
Mm.
of adrenaline that must have been rushing through the body as you were
Mm.
ready to go, but then that calmness kind of took over.
Mm.
Um, I'll ask the obvious question. When you did come to at the RBH, or the sorry, Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital, were you a bit peeved off, or were you relieved?
I was shocked. That was my first reaction. I
Mm,
really had not expected it. So
mm,
I was a
mm.
bit shocked and bewildered. And my partner and his mum were there, and he was a bit angry, which I understand now. It's
Mm.
like when you lose your little child in the shopping centre, and you
Yes,
have that massive panic.
yeah. It was
I get
shaken.
that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
get that now.
yeah.
So my biological mother had a car accident when I was quite young, when I was 3, and she became paralyzed. She sustained a brain injury and was paralyzed on the left side of her body. And for the last, she's now passed about 18 months ago, but for the last couple of decades of her life, she was in a nursing home, in bed 24/7. And my partner was like, oh my gosh, you said you never wanted to live like that. So he saw that as a possible outcome, whereas I hadn't. So as I processed it in the sort of days and weeks after, I just sort of went, oh my gosh, how did I survive that? And I must be meant to be here. So I have heard of people having regrets that it didn't work, or being mad about that, but that wasn't how I felt. I just went, whoa, there must be a reason I've survived, and I want to work that out, and I want to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Because I guess the real journey was just beginning, wasn't it? Once you were at the hospital and everybody had kind of got through those raw emotions, initial emotions. Because you bring up a very valid point, and look, I'm just full of gratitude that you've been so open and honest in sharing, and hopefully lots of people take hope in your story that you're here to survive. But you didn't just sit back, is my understanding. Obviously, you didn't go back into the corporate world as such, and most of us that have been in the corporate world, once we get the door out, we're not happy going back in there. Like, we just want to keep running, and myself included. And you then went on, as I said earlier, I like to chat to people that are either doing things differently or making a difference in the world. So you went on to make a very, very big difference in the world. So you were featured in the ABC Australian Story, which is on Monday nights. And I guess that's integral as part of your healing. Tell me what happened then. Once you'd got through the whatever you had to do medically and like mentally, what made you then take that experience and want to do something with it?
Yeah. So I think as I was started to process it, I was just, as I mentioned before, really focused on how do I make sure this doesn't happen again, and how do I do something with this? What do I do with this? How could I use this to help someone else? So in the early stages, the form that actually took was I became a telephone crisis supporter. So on the phones when people rang Lifeline. So I volunteered with Lifeline for 4.5 years. And I remember working with my psychiatrist at the time and saying, this is what I'm thinking I'd like to do. And he thought there was maybe some merit in that. And, I needed to make sure that I was well, and that, I wasn't putting either myself or someone else at risk in doing that work. So the crisis happened in August, and then the following February, I trained as a crisis supporter. And then I was on the phones. So within a year, so 11 months after the event. Now, as a crisis supporter, you don't share your personal story. It's all about the caller. But what I felt was, I had a degree of empathy that I may not have had if I hadn't been through what I'd been through. And I also found that it gave me perspective. So, I could see what was great in my life, and it gave me a sense of purpose that I could help other people with this experience. So that became what I did for, as I said, 4.5 years. And most people in our lives didn't know that I had attempted suicide, because my partner's a very private person, and I decided that I wanted to be the person that told my son, or our son, and I didn't want him to hear it from any other person. And he was 2, and I knew that he would not be ready to hear that message for a long time. So we basically didn't tell even close friends. And it was really interesting for me, because I found over time that it was like I had this big dark secret. You know, some of our closest friends had no idea what had happened. They knew that I'd done something to hurt my back. And you just think about it, like often we won't see our friends for months at a time. And you often have absolutely no idea what's really going on in their lives. You know, you only know what they reveal, which I think is really important for us to recognize. So what happened was years later, my little boy started at school, and I would have coffee catch-ups with these mums, school mums. And one day, this young woman who was actually a couple of the mums' sister was talking about her patterns and you know, different aspects, these insights in her life. And I looked at her and I went, oh my gosh, she's like half my age and got twice my insight. And from that moment, something just clicked in me where I went, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to have these negative thoughts in my mind anymore, because what I found is having that big secret too, it actually, in my mind anyway, made me feel even more separate from other people. And yeah, from that point, I basically said to the universe, well, what do I need? What do I need to have a fulfilling life? What do I do here? And over that following year, I just went through this massive personal transformation. I found these different strategies. I listened to lots of podcasts where it felt really helpful to somebody. I shared about my personal crisis experience. And what I found was that when I talked about it, I felt better. It was, I guess, a cathartic experience for me. And I ended up speaking at a storytelling event. And even how that came about was just bizarre. I was at the Woodford Folk Festival, and a friend said, oh, my mate's running this storytelling event. Let's go watch it. I'd never been to anything like that. And I sat in the audience, totally mesmerized. I was just like, wow, this is amazing. And I had this feeling in my stomach that I was meant to do that. When we walked away, I was like, oh, I need to find out more about this. I feel like I've got to do this. And I went to these storytelling events, and I didn't share about my mental health crisis. I just told these other stories, but it confirmed for me that that was something I wanted to do. And I reached out to my friend's friend who ran them. She worked for the ABC. And I said to her, look, I've got this other story. I think maybe I'm meant to share it. I don't know when or how, what, you know, this might look like. And we just decided to sort of sit with it and see what happened. And I don't know, in the sort of month after, she rang me and said, we've got this storytelling event at Noosa, and we're looking for speakers, and would you come and tell your story there? And there were lots of, you know, barriers that came up for me, all the reasons I couldn't do it. And then I just went, actually I could, because I had friends who lived at Noosa, and they were one of the very few people who knew. And I had a friend who was up the coast who could look after my son. And so anyway, I told this story to a room of 80 strangers when most people who were close to me in life had no idea. And then it was recorded and included in Richard Fidler's Conversations program. So for a few years, it just bounced around, and it was anonymous. It was in the ABC's Richard Fidler's program. And then a few years later, ABC contacted me and said, look, you know, we know that your podcast is, your stories really help people, and we'd like to include it in another podcast series. Would you be open to that? And I agreed. I was like, it's already out there. It's fine as long as it's anonymous. So it just said Donna in Brisbane. And then ultimately that led to Australian Story. And so, yeah, whoever would have thought, a path just revealed itself to me. And I just thought, I can help people, and I don't want people to go where I went. And I also knew that one of the turning points for me was having hope. There were a couple of different experiences I had that gave me some hope that I could feel different and that life could be different for me. And I remember they were pivotal moments in my journey to actually feeling fulfilled in life. That's a lot of talking.
I'm in awe of you. And I guess that word resilience that gets bandied around a fair bit at the moment, and we talk about resilience in children, and and I look back, and I've done a few more trips around the globe than what you have. Donna, I'm a bit older than you, but none of this stuff is taught in school in my time. I don't know if it is now. It just seems to be so wretchedly complicated, trying to get things into schools and things like that. And I look at what children are going through, and I've had some secondhand stories about what's been happening down in Victoria for some parents that are homeschooling, and they've been in the thick of it for months.
Yes.
I only had 6 weeks of it, and I'll take my hat off to any teacher. It's a massive journey to have these beautiful little minds in your responsibility. I guess you're meant to survive, Donna. I know that sounds a little bit cliche, a bit cheesy, but I think we all have a purpose in life, and it sounds like you've found yours. It's a hell of a way to get there, but I guess it's given me a little bit more understanding about what goes on, well, what went on in your mind, to kind of push you to that edge where you didn't think that life, was worth living. And a lot of these pressures are there all the time in the workplace. They're there in the home. They're there in lots of different formats. But I guess that whole mental illness thing it's still a little bit taboo. Now, I know that. So I know that, like, lots of exercise, lots of water, eating healthily, having good connections, they're all really important for physical health, but they also flow on towards the mental health, and particularly the
Yeah.
exercise and keeping yourself. You don't have to be a gym junkie, but just getting out. I know that I've had my own journey about 20 years ago, but I know if I stay in the apartment for too long, like after about 2 days, if I hadn't had classes or haven't been out and talking to people, I walk up the top here to Coles and go and buy something, then talk to the young fella or the young girl at the checkout, and then I come home. I just kind of, it's just that there's no drama around it. It's just sometimes I notice that, I've got to reconnect back in. Otherwise, you could get really holed up, particularly during COVID. You could get really holed up in your apartment and not, and then all of a sudden you're starting to go down a bit of a rabbit hole. What would so we know about the physical exercise, we know about the water, we know about all of that kind of stuff.
Yes.
What would be the 3 top things on your mind that you would advise people if they were starting to experience or have been experienced for a long time?
Yes.
What's your recommendations or your advice?
Yeah. So I think if somebody's currently experiencing a crisis, or maybe they have a bit of a propensity to do that, I think one of the most important things is to reach out to somebody, like to let somebody else know what's going on, to get help, to have a conversation with somebody. I find that just even the act of just talking about what's going on can alleviate some of that. Like when I have had my partner listen to me when I say, oh my goodness, I'm struggling right now, babe, I'm feeling like I don't have enough resources for everything that is drawing on my my capacity right now. It's weird, just even being heard can shift something. So I think reaching out to somebody is critical. Marie Forleo has this beautiful saying. Someone told me it came from her mum, but everything is figure outable. What we can tend to do is just, feel like we've got to resolve it all on our own. But if we've got ourselves into a bit of a state, if we've, lost our ability to be completely rational about things, that can be really, really difficult. So I would always say reach out to somebody. Another thing is we can question our thoughts. I didn't fully appreciate this, but we get, they say tens of thousands of thoughts, 65 to 80,000 thoughts a day, right? And I've even heard that as many as 95% are the same ones we had yesterday. And we feel like we are our thoughts often, and we're not. They're random things that pop into our brain, and they're really influenced by our patterns of thinking, because that builds strong neural pathways in our brain. And so even if we wanted to think differently, it's actually much harder to do that, because energy travels the path of least resistance. So we fall into our default thought patterns, but we can actually question them. Because I used to have thoughts like, I'm boring, there's something wrong with me, I'm different to other people. Those thoughts came to my mind regularly. I remember being at school and sitting next to one of the mums, and we'd had a chat, and then she got up and walked away, and the voice in my head said, oh, she left because you're boring. And it's like, she could have actually walked away for any other reason. It could have been to check on her child. She might have had to go to the toilet. But we make up these stories based on how we're feeling. And I, particularly at this point that came before me changing my life, had these very unhelpful default thoughts and beliefs. And that's not the way I think anymore, thankfully. But it took me questioning those thoughts and like digging into them and going, well, actually, there could have been other reasons. And this is actually what's great about me. There's all these lovely things, there's the fact that I have a really positive energy. There's the fact that I help people. I've always, all my life, I've been a helper. I've always been drawn to making a difference and supporting others. This is a beautiful quality. And so I just began to really tap into the positive parts of me, and over time those thoughts shifted. So I would have 10% of the unhelpful thoughts that I used to have, and that just came through challenging them, and then also thinking more positive thoughts or recognizing what is good about me. They would be two key things if someone's in something right now. Just to looking at how we view failure and opportunities to learn as well. I had totally just personalized what went on with through that argument, and feeling like I was failing at work with the project that we had on. But the fact is, failure is an event, it's not a person. And that's not my original quote, but when I heard it, it resonated so impactfully for me. And we can learn lessons from life. We can reframe our setbacks. We can take what we can from those things and move on, rather than making it a reflection of who we are. And I think that can be really helpful.
Donna, your little fellow's about 13
well.
years of age now,
I think it's really important that we have.
Sorry.
What's that?
Sorry, we've crossed across there. There was a delay. I'm sorry, I must have crossed. It sounded like you'd finished speaking, and I interrupted you. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
No, that's all good. I was just going to say, I think it's really critical that we have good, I'm going to call them resilience practices for thriving. The problem is, if we're deep in a ditch right now, if we're really struggling, it can be hard to enact these things. But I really encourage people when they're well to embed good practices in their life that then continue going so that it lessens the impact that a challenge has in their life.
Mm. Your little fellow's 13 now. I've just done the maths.
Yeah. No,
What's
he's
that? 40.
10.
40.
He's 10. He's 10
I was
now.
10. Oh, sorry. So,
Yes.
that's it. So my
Yeah.
maths wasn't very good. Sorry. It was 2012 when he was 2.
Yes.
So my maths lousy. So he knows the story now, obviously, because it's out in the public
Yeah.
arena. So how did that journey go? That would have been really difficult, I would imagine.
Yeah. It was interesting. So he found out when they were filming Australian Story, because I figured that if it was going to be on national TV, there was a risk that someone was going to talk about it, and he needed to understand. And also, they wanted him to be in I guess, the episode, because he's such a key person in my life. And yeah, it was an interesting discussion to have. I was just very honest and spoke quite simply about what happened, and said that, asked if he had questions, and said that I was happy to keep talking to him about it. And it seemed like we were in a good place with it and everything. And I said to him, it was, I had a voice in my head, and sometimes we have to be really careful, because what we think isn't always helpful for us. And I said, I wish I hadn't actually taken that action, and I'd reached out to somebody. And yeah, I thought we were all fine. And then maybe a couple of weeks later, we were in a shop, and I said something, and he said really loudly, "Oh, so is that why you jumped off the bridge, Mum?" And I was like, wow, okay.
There you go. Nice and public it is now.
Yeah. So then, I was like, oh, okay, we maybe need to talk about this a bit further. And I'm sure we will always have the conversation as I guess his development progresses, and his comprehension of the impacts of that. There's been little sort of conversations we've had on the way. I know when he was, maybe it was his 9th birthday, I put him to bed, and I moment where I was in so much gratitude to be here and to be putting my son to bed. And I just lost it. Like I had to go to the bathroom bawling my eyes out, because it just at that moment really hit me that I could have not had that, and he could have not had that in his life.
Yeah, pretty humbling,
That's
isn't it?
really shocking.
Well, it's very humbling for me to listen to that. I'm sure to my listeners as well. So it must have been an enormously humbling experience for you. Donna, we could talk about this for hours, because I think it's, and maybe some other time we can come back and explore some other places around this. What now? What now for Donna? What's the next step for you? You're in the corporate world, you're training, you're a keynote speaker, you're a mental wellness advocate, so you would have been busy this month. I'm just reading down here in my sheet.
Sure.
So I'm guessing the corporate world's going to be singing out fairly loud, trying, as they, well, on the assumption that they're getting people back into the on-site workplaces. I don't know, but I'm pretty well guessing that there might be a few broken souls trying to meld back into that environment, and some have loved being home with children because they've been able to do their work stuff around. They haven't had to put them in childcare and all that guilt stuff that us mums in particular kind of dump on ourselves. But then there are others, and then some are going back part-time. It just, you go into the city some days and there's nobody on the trains, that's for sure.
Yeah,
So
well.
what do you got planned? What do you got up your sleeve that you can share with us?
Yeah, sure. So I've made a transition this year, which has been really interesting for me, because I decided to move fully into speaking and training, and then COVID hit, and suddenly there was no work because people weren't running any events. I became a mental health first aid trainer last October. So I had run, I don't know, maybe four or five face-to-face courses when COVID hit. And I had just signed up my biggest corporate client at that time. We were going to train 80 staff in mental health first aid. All the sessions were booked in. I was just about to order the resources, and then it all fell over. And we didn't have an online course to run. So for months, I was in a state of just the unknown. And I have been career coaching up until this year. I'd career coach for between 6 and 7 years, and I was quite established in that work. But I just had this really strong sense that I wanted to move more fully into speaking and training, and that as long as I stayed working across both fields, I couldn't get the depth that I wanted to in terms of my professional development and, you know, being able to maximize my ability to serve the people I wanted to serve. So, you know, it was a good decision for me, but it was also, it tested my conviction when COVID hit, because career coaching did go quiet for about a month, but then all of a sudden I had a lot of calls about career coaching. And my partner is a sheet metal worker, so I'm with the same partner and we're going strong. And he couldn't understand why I was referring these career coaching inquiries. And I was saying to him, look, trust me, I have this vision of where I'm going and the work I want to do and how I can make a difference. And interestingly, it has all shifted quite a lot now. So I am regularly delivering mental health first aid. That client, I was able to train all of their staff, and I've recently picked up another client where it's actually 140 people. And so I see myself continuing to grow that part of my business and work more in the corporate space. I am doing some public mental health first aid workshops as well, but I love that I can share my story from a stage, but then I've got a resilience tool that I'm accredited in, and that can help equip people to lessen the impact of a challenge in their life and to thrive in their life, to deal with everyday setbacks and learn from them. And then I've got mental health first aid, which is recognizes that there are some people in our community that are struggling right now. How do we recognize that, and how do we support them and guide them to getting support from professionals who can really help them? So I've got some other things that sit under that as well that I work with corporate clients on, that are sort of like shorter sessions around mental health or resilience. And that is where I see myself putting my energy for the foreseeable future, because there's such a significant need for it.
They're all in good hands. And I guess once we can see mental health or wellness or whatever you want to call it in our strategic plans at corporate level.
Yes.
I had 30 years in government. I can't remember all the strategic plans that I wrote. I'm just trying to think. I don't think there was ever anything there about wellness or well-being, or it was all about, you know, KPIs and all that rubbish.
Totally.
Donna, some great stuff ahead, and I think the world will certainly be calling on you, knocking very hard on your door as this COVID episode kind of starts to pan out a little bit. So I wish you well. I'm just full of gratitude for the time that you've taken to spend with us today. Thank you so much. I'll get you to stay online, Donna. I'm just going to
Sure.
finish up now. But Donna, I'll get you to, I'll talk to you about some links, and also if people want to reach out to you, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, great. People can connect with me on Facebook, Donna Thistlethwaite. I've got a public page there, and LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn quite a lot. It's my most common social media channel.
Yeah, for that corporate level, it's really great. Donna, thank you so much. We'll call that a wrap to everybody else, and thank you for listening. And as I said earlier, If any of the content raises concerns for you, please reach out. Lifeline, Donna, I've forgotten the number.
13 11 14.
13 11 14. It's a 24/7
Sure is.
service,
Voice
isn't it?
and text, yes.
Yeah. So
Voice and message chat
yeah.
service.
Yeah, or family or friends or colleagues, or talk to your boss, or do something, and reach out. Okay, so we'll finish it there. Thank you so much, Donna, and I'll see everybody soon. Okay, bye
Thanks,
now.
Ruth. That's been a
Bye.
pleasure.
Bye.